My name is Camille Rowan, and I was 34 years old when it finally hit me. My family never really saw me, not as a person, not as a daughter, just as a reliable pair of hands and a wallet with legs. I used to think the role I played in my family, the quiet one, the helpful one, the one who always arrived early and stayed late, made me indispensable. But over time, indispensable had quietly turned into invisible. I'm the youngest of three daughters. My oldest sister, Joanna, is 5 years older than me and has spent her entire adult life in construction management, boasting about every male dominated field hurdle she's ever jumped. My middle sister, Iris, is 7 years older, a stay at home mom married to Darren, a loudmouth who thinks sarcasm counts as charm. Growing up, the two of them weren't the toss her in a closet kind of bullies. No, their version of cruelty was subtler, sharper than a paper cut, and just as easy to dismiss. Every joke landed on me. Every achievement of mine was met with some variation of must be nice or don't get cocky. I wasn't the golden child. I was the go-to daughter, the errand runner, the fixer, the free help. But I kept telling myself they cared. They just didn't know how to show it. If I kept showing up, if I stayed useful, they'd eventually see me. That was the lie that carried me through years of family gatherings, crises, and late-night phone calls that weren't about me, but what I could do for them. In my 20s, I got lucky in tech. Survived a turbulent startup, grew with it, and by the time I hit my early 30s, I'd built a comfortable life. No luxury cars or glittering penthouses, just a modest home, a quiet neighborhood, and enough savings to feel safe. I never flaunted it, never mentioned it, never tried to rub my success in anyone's face. If anything, I softened it. Hoodies, quiet weekends, simple routines. I didn't want my family thinking I'd changed. And I didn't hesitate to help them. I paid off part of Joanna's credit card debt when she thought the bank was out to get her. I helped Iris and Darren with a down payment when they were expecting their second child. I was the only one Mom called when the garage door shook loose or the water heater groaned. None of it was ever repaid. I didn't expect it to be. Maybe that was my first mistake. But what hurt wasn't the money. It was how easily they forgot me. Iris once hosted a birthday party for her daughter Riley, her eldest. I drove across town carrying a wrapped science kit I thought Riley would love. Except Iris forgot to tell me the venue changed. I stood alone in front of a rain-soaked bounce house with a gift and a forced smile waiting for people who weren't coming. When I finally found them, hours later, at an indoor trampoline park, Iris just laughed and said, "Oops, I assumed Joanna told you." Then she turned back to her wine slushie. I stayed anyway, pretending everything was fine, holding the camera for photos, slicing pizza, trying to belong. I told myself again, they don't mean it. And maybe I would have kept telling myself that. Maybe I would have stayed the quiet daughter, the unpaid helper, the invisible provider. But the truth has a way of showing itself even when you're desperate to look away. It happened on Riley's 14th birthday, the moment my family finally pushed me past the point of return. I'd bought her a PS5 months earlier, grabbed it during a rare restock, knowing how badly she wanted one. I kept it sealed in my closet, waiting for the right time, hoping it could be a fresh start. Proof that I didn't hold grudges. Proof that I still believed in family. I arrived early, of course. Helped set up folding chairs, strung up rainbow banners, positioned cupcakes on platters, while Mom pointed out imperfections. Darren barely acknowledged me beyond a grunt. Joanna flitted around like she was the event manager. Iris air-kissed me and moved on. No one asked how I was. They rarely did. When Riley finally tore open the wrapping paper and lifted the PS5 box, her face lit up. For half a second, I saw the child who used to run into my arms. Then her expression snapped shut. Riley snorted. "About time you did something useful, Aunt Camille. Mom says you're just a lonely loser with money." The room erupted. Iris laughed full shameless. Darren barked out a, "Damn," Joanna cackled from across the kitchen. Even Mom smirked behind her wine glass like the whole thing was adorable. I stood there holding a paper plate of pretzels, the only anchor keeping me from floating away in humiliation. I felt the laughter ripple through the room and realized it wasn't new. It had always been there, quiet, muffled behind closed doors. I had just been too devoted, too desperate, too hopeful to hear it. But in that instant, I heard everything. I smiled, calm, controlled, because something inside me wasn't breaking. It was hardening. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved with the precision of muscle memory tapping, scrolling, confirming. The auto pay for Iris's mortgage contribution gone. The family phone plan I'd been secretly covering terminated. Joanna's streaming access under my account removed. Darren's shady LLC paperwork tied to my address revoked. Groceries delivered to Mom's under my name disabled. No scenes, no yelling, no explanations. Just a quiet surgical extraction of myself from their world. After cake and forced hugs and Iris's whispered, "Don't ruin the mood," I drove home. Packed a small overnight bag. Left behind the tools and gadgets I kept for their emergencies. On the kitchen table, I placed a small lock box, no label, no key, no instructions. A single note sat beside it, "Figure it out." Then I left. I drove for hours through dark, empty roads. Rain tapped across my windshield like a reminder that the world outside my family was wide open and silent. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to help someone. I wasn't on call. I wasn't needed. I was just driving, for me. And while they slept soundly that night, fully unaware of what was coming, something in me began to wake up. Because that birthday humiliation, that was only the surface. The real story, the twisted, tangled one began. Years earlier, with a different gift and a different birthday. And if you want to understand how the quiet daughter finally snapped, we need to go back. All the way back. Before the humiliation at Riley's 14th birthday, before the locked box and the quiet revenge, my relationship with my family had already been unraveling one thread at a time. Not through explosions, not through dramatic fights, but through little moments, the kinds of moments that don't seem like much until they're stacked on top of each other, and suddenly you can't breathe under the weight. It really began years earlier on Iris's 37th birthday. It wasn't some milestone celebration, nothing special on the calendar. But she treated birthdays like coronations, full itineraries, assigned outfits, background music, playlists, even color palettes for guests. I remember walking into their house feeling anxious, like I was entering an event I hadn't been properly briefed on. I brought her a gift I'd chosen carefully, a luxury leather tote she'd been eyeing online for months, the kind she saved to her Pinterest boards and sighed about on phone calls. I'd wrapped it myself, wrote a handwritten note, something soft and sincere. For all that you juggle something worthy of it. It wasn't expensive to impress her, it was thoughtful, meant to make her feel seen. She tore the paper open, blinked at the tote, held it up by the strap like a questionable fruit at a market, and said, "Oh, Camille, you didn't have to go overboard. Really." Then she looked at Darren and added, "Can we return it? I think the color's off for fall." Laughter. Of course. The room erupted like I'd done something ridiculous instead of kind. Darren joked Camille's just trying to buy her way into heaven. Mom chimed in with, "She's generous to a fault." And Joanna, her third beer in hand, muttered, "Should have gone into tech like you." Everyone laughed again. Everyone except me. I stood there smiling, pretending the moment wasn't slowly carving into something tender behind my ribs. I told myself again that they didn't mean it, that it wasn't personal. But then Iris's younger child, Avery, only 10 at the time, piped up. "Aunt Camille gives people stuff they don't want. She gave me a book last Christmas." More laughter, genuine, unfiltered. For the first time in my life, I hated the sound of the people I loved being happy, because their happiness didn't feel warm. It felt sharp. It felt like a weapon. It felt like they all found something funny about me that I hadn't been let in on. I left that party early under the pretense of work to finish and drove home with the tote bag still sitting on their foyer table where Iris had left it. She didn't even take it upstairs. That night, I told myself again that I was being sensitive, that family was messy, that maybe I expected too much. But after that birthday, something inside me shifted. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet pullback. I stopped showing up with big gifts. Not out of pettiness, but because I couldn't stomach the idea of watching another carefully chosen present be unwrapped like an inconvenience. The shift didn't go unnoticed. A few months later, Iris called me while I was at the grocery store. Her voice was falsely casual. "Hey, is everything okay with you?" "Yeah, why?" "Well, you didn't bring anything for Avery's recital, not even flowers." "I didn't know I was supposed to," I admitted. "Well," she said, drawing out the word, "everyone else brought something. And you are the godmother, remember?" That one hit harder than I expected. Not because I forgot I was there in the second row recording the whole thing, but because Iris reduced my being present to a checklist item, never mind that my presence had never mattered unless it came with something in my hands. I apologized. Out of reflex, out of habit. And she accepted with a tone that said she absolutely had expected me to. And what did apologizing get me? More requests. more small demands, more casual uses of my time and money, as if I were obligated to subsidize their lives. I kept a mental tally, not because I wanted reimbursement. I never asked for a cent back, but because I needed proof I wasn't imagining the imbalance. In a single year, I covered $600 for Joanna's broken down car, $200 for Iris's emergency dental work, $300 to help mom with her heating bill, countless grocery runs, babysitting nights, last-minute errands, and more. Can you just Venmo me real quick messages than I could count? Every cent I spent on them was wrapped in the same bitter truth. Appreciation was optional. Entitlement was guaranteed. Then came the moment that should have woken me up sooner. I was laid off. The startup I'd helped build sold to a larger company, and my entire department was deemed redundant. Just like that, what I thought was stability melted into uncertainty. I wasn't panicked. I had savings. But emotionally, I felt lost, untethered. I waited for a call, a text, even a quick, "Hey, are you okay?" from one of them. Nothing. A week passed before Iris reached out, not to ask how I was doing, but to ask if I had time to help Darren set up an online store since you're not working right now. When I told her I'd been laid off, she replied with, "Oof, well, I guess it's good you don't have kids or a husband. Less stress, right?" I didn't respond. That silence became my first boundary. I began saying no, not with attitude, not with anger, but with quiet clarity. "No, I can't drive mom to her appointment. Joanna lives closer." "No, I won't co-sign another refinance. It's not a good idea." "No, I'm not attending Darren's marketing relaunch party." Their reactions were immediate and icy. Joanna accused me of changing. Iris told mom I was acting superior. Mom left voice messages about how family is supposed to show up. But for once I didn't fold. Then came the call that dragged me right back into their game. It was near Riley's birthday. Iris called voice bright and sugary. "So Riley's been begging for a PS5, she said. And I told her Aunt Camille always comes through. Think you can hook her up?" I should have said no. I know that now. But old habits die hard. That deeply conditioned reflex to earn approval by giving. It kicked in before I could stop it. I bought the PS5, sealed, untouched. I let it sit in the corner of my closet like a detonator, knowing it would either mend something or break something forever. Turns out it did both. The humiliation at Riley's party was just the spark that lit everything on fire. But the real explosion came after days later when I discovered that Iris had used my old paperwork, forged my signature, and opened a new credit card under my name. She didn't even deny it. She said, "I knew you'd say no if I asked. And you're not hurting for money, Camille." That sentence was a knife, not a slash, a slow press. I spent hours on the phone with the bank proving the signature wasn't mine, hours freezing my credit, hours cleaning up the mess left by a sister who thought my life, my name was hers to use. When the bank cleared the charges and flagged her account for investigation, she texted me, "Real mature." That was the moment everything became clear. They didn't love me. They loved access to me. And when the access stopped, the mask slipped. The quiet daughter they had depended on, mocked, minimized, and used for years wasn't gone. She was waking up. And when I woke up fully, when I finally saw how deep the cuts went, I made a decision that would change everything. But before I could walk away, I needed to understand the truth behind my family's cruelty. I needed to know why they were so comfortable hurting me. And that understanding, strangely enough, began with the locked box I left on Iris's kitchen table. The night I drove away from Riley's birthday party, leaving that locked box on Iris's kitchen table, I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't even angry, not in the thunderstorm, screaming into a pillow sort of way. I felt empty, as if I'd stepped out of my own life and left the version of myself they depended on behind. The fixer, the convenient daughter, the silent wallet. She stayed there sitting at their dining table next to the box they didn't understand. And I drove into the dark. I ended up at a cheap rental cabin an hour outside the city. Nothing elegant, no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and a heater that made a shrill whistle every time it turned on like it resented being alive. But the silence was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I wasn't on call. No incoming emergencies, no guilt-soaked requests, no, since you're not busy, messages. Just quiet. I dropped my overnight bag on the floor, sank down beside the small wooden bed, and stared at the wall. At first, I waited to feel something: anger, grief, resentment, but nothing came. Just a numbness that felt strangely liberating. That emptiness. It was the first thing I'd owned in a long, long time. The text started around midnight. "Joanna, Netflix is down. Did you change something, Mom? Are you okay?" Iris is crying. "Darren." Not cool. I had stuff scheduled. Iris. Very classy. You feel powerful now. I read them. And then I didn't. By the second night, I left my phone face down in the cabin bathroom just to get some sleep. They didn't understand the box. They didn't understand the locks I'd quietly been building in my life for years. Locks they never noticed until they got shut out. But the guilt, that part came easily. That's the curse of being the dependable daughter. You're trained to absorb every consequence, apologize for every discomfort, smooth every crack until nothing resembles your own boundaries anymore. So when I finally stopped fixing everyone else's lives, I felt like I was breaking something sacred. Except the only thing breaking was the illusion. I stayed at the cabin for 2 weeks. During the day I walked, not to exercise, just to move. I wandered through pine trails, sat by a lake that looked like a silver plate under the sky, and watched the water shift with the wind. I picked up stones, wrote in a leather notebook I'd never used before. The lack of noise made every small memory louder. I wrote down good memories first, like Mom rubbing my back when I had the flu as a child, Joanna braiding my hair before our first day of school, Iris letting me borrow a dress for my high school dance. Little moments I had long buried. They weren't always cruel, or maybe they were, and the good moments were the exception. I didn't know yet, but writing them down helped me see the picture more clearly. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. For years, love had been given only when I cost them nothing. By the end of the second week, my headaches were gone. I slept better than I had in years. My appetite came back. My hands stopped trembling. When the quiet finally settled into me, instead of around me, I did something I hadn't done since arriving. I turned my phone back on. There were voicemails. Dozens. Riley had left none. Of course she hadn't. But one message caught my eye because the number wasn't familiar. A 12-second voicemail from a woman named Nadia, someone I had met briefly at a tech conference in Austin the year before. She'd seen my LinkedIn update and reached out with an opportunity, a new startup, a stealth project, a team she thought I'd be perfect for. She remembered me. Me, not my usefulness, not what I could provide, just me. I called her back. 3 weeks later, I returned to the city, but not to my old house. I didn't step foot in that place again. Instead, I rented a small condo near a park and 2 blocks from a bakery I loved. Clean walls, new floors, fresh air. A life that didn't echo with old obligations. Nadia's startup was real scrappy, ambitious, and deeply focused on data privacy tech. The work felt right. It felt like mine. And the team, they listened when I spoke. They asked for my ideas, not my favors. They valued me without conditions. I found a rhythm again. Work swims at the gym, quiet walks in the park after dinner, evenings writing in my notebook. Therapy sessions where I stopped pretending everything was fine. One day after I described years of bending until I snapped, my therapist looked at me and said something that clung to my ribs. Camille, they didn't love you because you didn't need anything. They loved that you were someone who never asked. I cried in my car afterward, but it was the clean kind of crying, the kind that feels like a release, not a collapse. Slowly, I built a life beyond them. I reconnected with Marcus, a friend from college. We grabbed coffee, caught up, ended up starting a weekly game night with a small circle of people who laughed without cruelty. I joined a gym again. I started swimming laps like I used to in my 20s, the water smoothing out knots I didn't know I had. I cooked more, slept better, and for the first time I realized I didn't miss them. Not really. I missed the idea of what I hoped we could be. But the family I actually had, the ones who laughed at my humiliation, I didn't miss them at all. Then one morning, while sipping coffee on my balcony overlooking the park, my phone buzzed with a familiar name. Mom. I should have ignored it. I almost did. But curiosity, or maybe the last flicker of old hope, made me answer. Her voice was brittle, forced warm. Hi, Camille. I hope you're doing well. I am. Silence pulsed. Then she said, We found the key. I didn't respond. She continued. The box. The one you left. We didn't understand at first, but then Joanna recognized the engraving on the bottom. Said it matched the watch you gave her years ago. I imagined all of them around the kitchen table, afraid to open a box, because for the first time it came from me with no instructions and no strings. What did you think was inside? I asked. Another pause. We thought maybe a letter or something dramatic. And what was it? Her inhale cracked slightly. You know what it was. Of course I did. Inside the box was the forged credit card documents, the bank statements, screenshots of every text where they mocked or used me, a decade of financial receipts showing everything I'd covered. And the last file, a recording from Riley's birthday party. Iris had posted an Instagram story that day. She deleted it 5 minutes later, but not before I screen recorded it. I never intended to use it against them. I just wanted them to hear themselves the way I'd heard them, raw, sharp, unedited. Mom's voice thinned. Camille, Iris isn't doing well. She lost the house. The card companies are investigating. She said you could clear it up. She's right, I said. I could. Silence swelled. But I won't. I ended the call. And for the first time since I was a child, I didn't feel shaky or guilty for disappointing my family. I felt steady. But the thing about people who refuse accountability is that when pushback doesn't work, they get desperate. And desperation was coming. In a way I never expected. I thought cutting contact would give my family time to reflect, to recognize the damage they'd done. But people who've spent their entire lives avoiding accountability don't suddenly discover self-awareness. They look for someone to blame, and when the reliable daughter stops absorbing the fallout, they panic. The first sign of desperation came not through a call or text, but through the mail. A beige envelope with no return address. My name printed in blocky letters that pretended too hard to be anonymous. Inside was a single sheet of paper type-centered. Ice cold. You made your point. Now undo it. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. It was a command. I recognized the tone instantly. Iris's tone. The one she used when she wanted something but didn't want the burden of asking for it. I folded the note and placed it on my kitchen counter. Just another reminder that Iris believed consequences were optional for her as long as I still existed somewhere in the background. Amen. But the second sign, the one that tightened something behind my ribs, came from Mom. Her name flashed on my phone one evening while I was brushing my teeth. I considered letting it ring out, but the leftover instinct to respond to her tugged at me. I answered. She didn't bother with small talk this time. Your sister is going through hell, she said sharply. They're auditing her accounts. She had to pull the kids out of their activities. They're selling the car. Guilt used to work on me like a switch, but this time nothing inside me flickered. I stayed silent. Mom pushed harder. Don't you think this is enough? You proved your point. Mom, I said calmly. She forged my signature. She panicked. She laughed when Riley humiliated me in front of all of you. She didn't mean it, she said, her voice rising like a pot left boiling too long. She was just repeating what she heard. That slip what she heard was all I needed. They always betrayed themselves eventually. I ended the call politely but firmly, then sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee as the sun dipped behind the trees. It became painfully clear they weren't going to stop. The silence hadn't humbled them. My absence hadn't inspired reflection. It had only created a vacuum they were now scrambling to fill with blame. They would keep pushing until they got what they wanted, my money, my name, or my compliance. So I made a decision. If they wanted a villain, I'd become one, but not the kind they imagined. I wouldn't yell, or threaten, or sabotage. I would be thorough, and it started with the house. Years earlier, when Iris and Darren were trying to buy their first place, their credit was a maze of issues, collections, late payments, maxed out cards. I remembered Iris crying on the phone while Darren ranted in the background about banks not understanding creative entrepreneurs. They'd found their dream home, she said, and would die if they lost it. I said yes, of course I did. Back then, yes was the only word I knew how to say to my family. But I didn't just co-sign the loan, I co-signed the title. The house was legally half mine. We had agreed that once they stabilized financially and refinanced, they would transfer it fully to their names. That never happened. For a decade, I received mail addressed to Camille Rowan and Iris Whitaker joint owners. Property taxes, insurance updates, paperwork reminders. Every year I mentioned it. Every year Iris said, "Oh yeah, we're working on that." They never were. I realize now that keeping me on the title meant keeping access to my name, my stability, my credit. It meant keeping me tethered to them. So I made an appointment with a real estate attorney. In the quiet, polished office on the 18th floor of a downtown building, I explained everything. The cosign, the forged card, the toxic dynamic, the birthday humiliation. The attorney listened calmly, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, he said, "You're a 50% legal owner. You have every right to force a sale or demand a buyout." "It's been 10 years, I said. "That strengthens your position." I left his office holding a folder of paperwork and a list of options. Option 1, force a sale and claim half the equity. Option 2, Offer Iris a chance to buy out my share at a fair price. Option 3. Sit on it and let the house become leverage whenever they slipped up again. But I wasn't interested in dangling threats. I wanted freedom. So I drafted a formal offer, a buyout price below market value, still generous even after everything. 30 days to accept. If they refused, I'd file a petition to force the sale. I mailed it by certified letter. Iris's response came 4 days later. A handwritten note in her rigid looping script. You're bluffing. You wouldn't screw over your own family. That was when I knew she still didn't understand who I had become. I forwarded her note to my attorney. Within a week, we filed the petition. At the same time, I reached out to Lewis, a former coworker and now a forensic accountant with a reputation for exposing financial rot like a bloodhound. We weren't close, but we were friendly enough that when I told him the situation, he said toxic people always leave receipts. I can help. He began digging. What he found in 2 weeks was staggering. Darren's self-proclaimed entrepreneur had listed me as a silent partner in 3 different LLCs without my knowledge. He'd used old contracts, copied digital signatures, and even filed a pandemic relief grant application using my name and EIN from an old consulting project. Iris had funneled money through a PayPal account linked to my email. There were transfers between personal and business accounts that made no sense except in the context of hiding poor decisions. None of this was petty, none of it was accidental. Each act was a tiny theft wrapped in their belief that I would never notice, and if I did, I'd forgive it. I organized everything with Lewis's help, printed files, color-coded sections, created a binder thick enough to change the temperature of a room. I didn't plan to sue them, not yet. I simply wanted them to see the mess they'd made. But I also needed a witness, someone rational, someone who knew me, someone who wasn't family. So I asked Marcus to come with me to Iris's house. He agreed without hesitation. We drove over on a Wednesday afternoon. The neighborhood felt quieter than I remembered, as if the wind itself had pulled back from the tension radiating from the house. The lawn was overgrown, the mailbox paint chipped. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a life that had stopped being maintained. I knocked. Iris opened the door. She didn't look smug or defiant this time. She looked worn, sleepless, brittle, like someone who'd been holding her breath for weeks. "What do you want, Camille?" she asked flatly. "We need to talk." She didn't invite us in, but she stepped aside. Darren was slumped on the couch in basketball shorts, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl. Avery sat at the dining table, pretending not to notice anything, eyes glued to a screen. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. I handed Iris the manila folder. "These are copies," I said. "Everything you've done using my name." She flipped through the pages. Her face barely moved. After a moment, she laughed short and brittle. "You've been busy." "No," I said. "You have been sloppy." Her eyes snapped up. "Why are you doing this? Is this fun for you?" "No, but it's necessary." "So what she said?" Voice tightening. "You want me to grovel, to beg, to fall on my knees and thank you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She set the folder on the table with a thud. "You were always self-righteous," she whispered. "Always needing to be the victim." "No," I said, voice calm. "I just got tired of being one." Darren looked up from his bowl. "What's going on?" "Your wife used Camille's EIN to apply for a grant," I said. "That's federal." Darren froze. "What I didn't..." "Did you not know I asked? Maybe she lied to both of us." I let the silence stretch until Iris finally looked away. "You have 1 week," I said. "Pay me for my half of the house. Settle the accounts. Transfer ownership. Or I'll let the courts do it for me." I walked to the door. Then I paused. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said quietly. "I'm doing it because you already hurt me. Repeatedly. And you never stopped." I stepped out onto the porch. "And now you learn what it feels like when I stop too." The door clicked shut behind me, like the end of a chapter. Marcus and I walked back to the car. The air felt thick, heavy, like something in the universe was holding its breath. But the next week, that's when everything truly collapsed. A spiral so fast, so brutal, so irreversible that even I couldn't have predicted how far they would fall. When I walked off Iris's porch that day, I expected resistance. I expected her to rally every ounce of manipulation she had ever used on me. Guilt tears, threats, pleas. What I didn't expect was silence. A heavy, unnatural silence that clung to the neighborhood like fog. But silence is never empty. It's pressure before a storm. The first blow hit just 3 days later. I was at work reviewing design notes with my team when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but during lunch, curiosity won. It was the county clerk. The petition to force the sale of Iris's house had been officially processed. Sheriff's deputies were on their way to serve the legal notice. Later, I would hear from a neighbor, someone I vaguely remembered from block parties, that Iris screamed at the deputy on her front lawn, insisting it was all a misunderstanding and I would never do something like this. She threatened to call her lawyer only for the deputy to inform her that refusing papers didn't invalidate them. The neighborhood saw everything, and Iris cared immensely about what neighbors saw. That was blow one. Blow two struck almost immediately after. The IRS, already quietly reviewing pandemic-era grant fraud, had received the documentation I forwarded. Copies of Darren's fake LLC filings, the application using my EIN and Louis' detailed breakdown. The investigator reached out to Darren directly. From what Louis later heard, Darren panicked, blamed me, then blamed Iris, and finally blamed a rogue intern. None of it mattered. The inquiry had already escalated. Blow 3 came from Mom. She showed up unannounced. I saw her through my condo's peephole, small, stiff, clutching her purse like a lifeline. For a moment, I almost softened. Old habits. But then I opened the door and remembered every moment she'd chosen silence over protecting her youngest daughter. I won't come in, she said, voice trembling, but please, just talk to me. I stepped outside. She wrung her hands. When does this stop, Camille? You're tearing your sister's life apart. No, I said gently. Her choices are doing that. She's losing the house, Mom whispered. The kids are stressed. They're drowning. She forged my name. She committed fraud. She humiliated me publicly and privately. This is the consequence, not my revenge. Mom shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. You used to be so kind. I still am, I said, my voice soft but steady. Just not to people who use it as a weapon. That answer broke something in her. She left without another word. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. The fourth blow came unexpectedly from Riley. It started with the recording inside the locked box. Iris and Mom must have played it, but what they didn't expect was for Riley to find it on Iris's laptop earbuds alone in her room. The screen recording captured everything Riley's derisive about time you did something useful, Iris's laughter, Darren's chuckle, Joanna's mocking comment, and Mom's quiet smirk. Every voice but mine. Riley watched herself repeat words she didn't fully understand. Words fed to her by adults who mocked me behind closed doors. She listened to her mother laugh at my humiliation. A child knows when someone is hurt. They know when laughter is cruel. Sometime late that night, Riley confronted Iris. Voices rose. Arguments escalated. Iris tried to blame me. Riley pushed back. Iris tried to blame stress. Riley saw through it. Iris tried to blame her daughter, her own child, for overreacting. When Riley refused to back down, Iris did what cornered adults sometimes do. She slapped her. A neighbor heard the scream, then the argument, then the crying. And someone called CPS. That was blow 4, the one that fundamentally altered Iris's world. CPS arrived the next morning. The report of emotional and physical escalation combined with the ongoing financial investigation made the situation too volatile. The kids, Riley and Avery, were placed into neutral temporary care. Not with me. I never requested that, and I wouldn't have accepted it. They needed stability, not another battlefield. Iris broke completely after that. She called me 13 times in 1 hour, texted paragraphs of rage, then begged, then threatened, then pleaded again. I didn't respond. Because this had never been about her punishment. It was about my boundaries, and about consequences that had finally caught up with her. By the time the 30-day deadline passed, Iris had not made a single payment toward buying out my share of the house. She didn't have the means. Darren's accounts were frozen due to the investigation. Joanna had her own mountain of debt. So the court authorized the sale. A young couple put in an offer at full price. The market was strong, the location decent, the equity high. When all was finalized, fees, taxes, division, the physical check landed at $178,000. Half the value of a life I never lived in but continuously funded. I did not pocket it. I deposited the money into 2 separate trust accounts, one for each child, Riley and Avery. They won't know about it until they turn 18. They won't know where it came from until they're old enough to decide what to do with the truth. I didn't do it for Iris. I did it because her children deserved a life better than the one they were raised in, one filled with debt manipulation and emotional weaponry. The house was gone. Darren's investigation was ongoing. CPS was overseeing Iris's family. Mom had shrunk to short weather text. Joanna stayed silent, likely unsure how to spin the narrative. And me, I was finally breathing. My job with the startup was thriving. My team respected me. Friends checked in without needing anything. I swam 3 nights a week, losing myself in the calming repetition of strokes and breath. I walked through the park after dinner, passing strangers who looked at me without expectation. My condo felt like a sanctuary, quiet, warm mine. Sometimes I reread the old texts from my family, not out of bitterness, but to remember the distance I had put between us. Growth feels real when you measure how far you've stepped away from the person you once were. People imagine revenge as fire and spectacle, but the quiet kind, the kind where you reclaim your life, your boundaries, your dignity, that kind lasts. I don't think my family will ever understand why I walked away. Not truly. They don't have the emotional vocabulary for it, and maybe they never will. But here is the truth I finally learned. You cannot save people who drown you every time you offer a hand. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply choosing peace. When the court finalized the sale and my lawyer handed me the closing documents, he asked, "Would you like me to send copies to them as well?" I closed the folder and smiled. "No," I said. "They already opened the box," and that was enough. In the weeks after the house sale closed, my life settled into a rhythm that felt foreign at first. Not because there was too much happening, but because for the first time nothing was. No emergency calls, no guilt-laced messages, no just one small favor. Silence, I realize, doesn't feel empty when it's chosen. It feels like space. I filled mine slowly. Every morning I walked to the bakery near my condo and ordered the same thing, an almond croissant and a lavender latte. I learned the barista's name and she learned mine. I passed the same elderly man feeding pigeons on the park bench every morning, until eventually we started nodding at each other, a silent acknowledgement that we'd become part of each other's routines. My life no longer orbited my family's crises. It orbited my own quiet joys, and that alone was a revolution. One Friday afternoon, after a long stretch of coding sessions at work, I stepped outside to cool air and late sunlight rippling between the trees. I stopped at the park fountain, listening to the water spill over the stone edge, and for a moment I thought of my father, how he used to take me to parks when I was a child, letting me toss coins into fountains and whisper wishes I never said out loud. Back then my wish was simple, make my family happy with me. Now I understood how much that wish had cost me. I was still lost in thought when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Not Mom, not Joanna, not Iris. I hesitated, then answered. Camille, the voice was soft, young, tentative. It was Riley. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. All I could hear was the faint shuffle of wind on the other end, as if she was standing outside somewhere alone. "Hi," I finally whispered. There was a shaky breath. I don't really know what to say, but I wanted to, try. I sat down on a park bench, my heart beat loud in my ears. "You don't have to say anything," I told her gently. "No, I do." Her voice wavered. I listened to that recording, the one in the box, about 50 times, and every time I did, I felt worse. A pause. I didn't realize how mean I sounded. I didn't even understand why I said it. I was just repeating everyone else. I closed my eyes. Not in pain this time, but in something like release. "I know," I said. "You were a kid copying adults." Riley sniffed. "I'm really, really sorry." The apology wasn't polished. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't fix 10 years of damage. But it was real. It cracked something open in me I didn't realize was still sealed shut. "You're not the one who owes me the biggest apology," I said softly, "and you are not responsible for your mother's choices." Silence stretched warm this time. "Are you okay?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I think so," she said. "CPS says we might stay with Mom again soon, but there's rules now, and therapy, and they're watching everything." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "Good. You deserve structure and safety." The next words surprised me even as I said them. "When you're older," I added, "and you need help, real help, not favors, I'll be here. For you, and for Avery." Riley exhaled shakily relief, threading through the sound. "Thank you. I don't want you to hate me." "I don't," I said. "I never did." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, watching sunlight pool across the pavement, like a quiet answer to a question I'd been asking my whole life. Maybe I couldn't rebuild a family, but I could build a future one small, careful piece at a time, one child at a time, if necessary. In the following months, life unfolded with a kind of quiet steadiness I had never experienced before. Work flourished. Nadia promoted me to lead a sub-team. Marcus and I restarted our weekly game nights, which grew into a small circle of people who felt more like a chosen family than anything I'd grown up with. Mom sent me holiday texts, short, polite, distant. Joanna stayed silent, which was for the best. Iris sent nothing. The investigations kept her occupied. CPS required her to attend counseling and parenting classes. Darren's IRS inquiry stretched on. Their old life had been stripped down to its bones. But none of it pulled me back in. Peace had replaced obligation. Boundaries had replaced guilt. Distance had replaced dependency. And then one evening, as I was leaving work, my attorney called. "The final matter regarding the Whitaker property has been closed," he said. "Everything is officially finalized. There's no more action required on your end." I stood in the lobby listening to the words settle around me like dust finding a place to land. It was over. Not the loud, climactic ending I once imagined, not a screaming match, not a courtroom showdown, not a fiery confrontation. Just closure. A clean, precise line drawn between my past and my present. I walked home with a lightness I'd never felt before. When I reached my condo, I poured myself a small glass of wine, stepped onto my balcony, and watched the city lights shimmer like embers across the skyline. For years, I believed choosing myself was selfish. I believed walking away was abandonment. I believed saying no made me unlovable. But I had finally learned the truth. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. Walking away from harm is not cruelty. Saying no is not unkind. It's survival, it's reclamation, it's adulthood with a spine. And as I stood there with the night breeze brushing against my skin, I realized something else, something that made the last remnants of guilt slide quietly off my shoulders. My family didn't break because I left. They broke because I stopped holding the pieces together. And the strongest kind of healing is the kind where you let the broken things stay broken,